I'm proud to introduce Yvonne Malmgren. She is the Manager of Business Critical Communications at Cisco, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about the importance of crisis communications and crisis management. So welcome, Yvonne.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone being here on Saturday after what sounded like was going to be a late night for a lot of folks last night. Dinner was awesome. It sounds like you've had some great speakers so far, and I appreciate the chance to come and have a chat with this group today. We talk a lot about theory in crisis communications. There are classes about it, there are details, there are plans, there are case studies, Harvard Business Review, right? It's endless. The challenge I think that a lot of folks have is, what does it really mean? What is it like to live it? Versus talking about the theory and the plans. And I love to liken it to kind of that Mission Impossible, right? When it comes up, you're going to have to gather intel, a lot of it, and it's not all going to be in one place. You're going to have to establish allies, because the only way to get through it is with an amazing, amazing team who know way more than you do about stuff you never knew you'd have to do a deep dive into. You'd have to be ready on a moment's notice to drop everything. That means calls at 11 p.m. at night and 4 a.m. in the morning. I generally give the guidance, if it's going to be 4 a.m., it better be really, really good, right? But it does happen. You have to charge into the unknown. There are no roadmaps for a lot of this stuff. So you surround yourself with an amazing team who can help you access or create whatever you need to handle this successfully. And I'm going to grab this. What does that take, right? A lot of folks ask, how do you do it? What drew you to this? Resilience and being comfortable with change, right? There's that whole change is the only constant. We've all heard it. And yet, when somebody moves your desk again, you get frustrated, right? When somebody changes your job title again, there's this frustration when there are new leaders. We have an organization right now, I think some of our team members have had 6 bosses in a year and a half. That's a lot of change. They don't like it. Right? That is a tough challenge. So being comfortable with that. The other thing to really think about, if you're like, I love crisis comms and I think I want to do this, you see all the hard stuff, right? You know where all the bodies are buried, you see all the skeletons, and are you an optimist? Because as much as you deal with the stuff day in and day out, you see all the dirty laundry. Are you able to keep the perspective that this is not all there is to our business or our organization or our school? Or whatever you're working on, that this is a small fraction, and while it monopolizes my 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it does not represent the whole. It's easy to have some morale challenges in this kind of a job if it's what you do day in and day out. You will become somewhat paranoid. You will become somewhat skeptical. You'll question the motives, the what, the where, and think 4 steps ahead on everything. It's an awesome place to be, and it's an exhausting place to be. But if you enjoy that strategizing, if you enjoy that chess game mindset, a full-time role in crisis comms can be a really, really wonderful place to be. It's critical to keep perspective, and if you're not sure if you have the resilience, are you sure whether or not you've ever even been tested, right? Think back through your own history and start identifying things that tell you maybe you do. And I love the popcorn story as an example, right? It's not too serious, but what I found is it's the small tests of resilience over time that have created this mindset in this space to say, I love my job. I love what I do, and I was built for it, and I was shaped for it, and I was groomed for it in ways I never knew. I had a very modest upbringing. My father was a mechanic. My mom was a waitress. They worked incredibly, incredibly hard for everything. We never went without. We collected change in a gallon wine jug to be able to go to the drive-in movies, right? Or to go do something special as a family night out. It was amazing. But it was not a home of frivolous spending. It was a household that loved Christmas, though, which sounds like an oxymoron now, right? Not a lot of frivolous spending, Christmas in America, right? It was craziness. It was like Santa's North Pole had actually threw up on our living room every December, right? There were ceramics and there were candy dishes and there were nuts. There were trays of nuts with the actual nutcrackers everywhere, right? You could not get glitter on you. It was going to happen. Every single present was wrapped impeccably and it had bows and ribbons and colorful tags. It was impressive. Now, that did not come without a cost. There was work that led up to that. The pride and joy of my mom's being at Christmas time was her tree. We had a ceiling tall from, it was either Sears or Montgomery Ward's, for those of you who remember those stores, all coated in the white fake snow, every inch of the branch, right? And there were ornaments that had to wait, and there were wooden beads that had to wait. They didn't get put on until the popcorn got put on. Anybody here know what I'm talking about? There's a couple. All right. So we would actually string popcorn to wrap on our tree as garland. What does that mean? Now, this is a test of resilience, folks, seriously. We would pop countless jars of the old school pop, 12-inch pot on the stove, right? No butter, just oil. Put it in brown paper bags, let it sit for 4 days and stale, and then begin to string. So what does stringing popcorn look like? It means you grab a 10-foot string of sewing thread and a needle. You fold it in half, so you actually have a 4-foot string. Tie a knot. You sit on the living room floor for what felt like weeks when you watched TV. Ours were MASH and The $1 Million Man. But we would sit on the floor and string stale popcorn, 50 feet of it. Do the math, right? Half-inch kernels, you need 50 feet of popcorn. That's 1,200 pieces of popcorn on string, right? Now, that doesn't count the ones that got destroyed because they weren't stale enough, the ones you stabbed yourself because you tried to drive it through the kernel, and the ones that you just broke, right? It took a lot of time, a lot of monotonous time, a lot of planning, and then we tied them all together and you would get it on the tree and you finally got to put the ornaments up, and it was so incredibly special. It was time well spent. But it's moments like that are resilience in training. You didn't realize it, right? But it taught me patience. It taught me the importance of prep. Again, you can't string fresh popcorn. Has to be stale. You gotta wait. You gotta tie the knots right. You have to keep the dog away from the tree, right? All right, you get me, right? It is a lot of work, and there are a lot of opportunities that are going to take you to this place. Think back and write those stories, document them. If you're ever in doubt, you've been tested for resilience. It may not be in a major way, right? It may not be, last night we were talking about the Kmart scenario where Michael Moore showed up on the lawn, talking about firearms and bullets being sold in the store. It won't be a Papa John's pizza, right? There are a lot of opportunities where your resilience has been tested. Make sure you internalize that, own that, right? Realize that you have this, because you've got to have the confidence before you jump forward in this. And the next thing you're really going to need is your team. Crisis comms is not about being the smartest person in the room. In fact, Jack Welch had a great saying, I was never the smartest guy in the room. From the first person I hired, I was never the smartest guy in the room. If you're a leader and you're the smartest guy in the world, or in that room, you've got real problems. Crisis comms is the exact same way. It's not my job to know everything. I don't have to outsmart everyone. I don't have to counsel our senior executives on every single thing they're going to do. I need to bring the right team together. I need to make sure that I have engineering there. I work at Cisco, so I work in tech, right? Nothing can go wrong there, ever, right? I'm not an engineer. I love our engineers. I don't let our engineers talk to the press, right? Some of them, after a lot of coaching, because they know everything. They know the detail. I need finance. I need legal. I need social media, because as much as I like to think I stay on top of these things, we have experts in this stuff. I don't need to know everything. I need to know who to bring in. I need to know how to trust them. And I need them to know up front that they're going to be brought in, right? I need to make these relationships strong and lasting and engaging. I need to know what they're working on, and they need to know what might be coming up in my world ahead of time. You can't build those teams on the fly. It takes weeks, months, years. My former boss left almost 2 years ago. He was an amazing leader. He went on to an awesome new job. He couldn't not take the job. People still ask for him, right? Those are relationships. Folks that still say, well, what would Nigel have done? That's huge 2 years later, right? Build those relationships. But your work team is not the only team. There's this saying, you are a reflection of the company you keep, right? The company you work for, if you're going to take on crisis comms for them, make sure they're a reflection of the company you want to keep. Are you aligned with their core values? Are you aligned with their HR and leadership strategies and approaches and how they treat people? When it comes down to crisis, it's about people. It's about human beings. Otherwise, it really wouldn't matter, right? And the last thing is your support team at home. This job's not easy. Even if it's not your full-time job, crisis communications is not easy. You got to make sure that your home team is bought in as well, that your family knows your phone's going to ring at 11 p.m. or 4 a.m. You're going to have to sometimes leave dinner with folks you haven't seen in a long time. You're going to say, I'm sorry and thank you for being patient. Make sure that they're also good with that, because this also isn't a temporary assignment. It's not a role you say, I'm going to go do this for a year, I'm going to have it on my resume, and I'm going to move on. Those relationships we talked about, they take a long time to build. They're built on trust, they're built on expertise, they're built on confidence. And that's not something you do and can walk away from. You will not have served your company well in doing that. You will have not served your own reputation well in doing that. Make sure your family's bought in, and if it's not the right time, it's not the right time. The next thing I tell folks is not every crisis is your crisis. You personally or even your company, right? I am a strong believer in helping people learn. You don't have to be the owner of all crises to prove that you are the one who should be brought in when it's a real major crisis. Train people, teach people your processes, and empower them to go do it, right? Go handle it on their own next time if it's really easy and it's low-hanging fruit and it's something that fits the textbook. You can teach someone else to do that. Protect yourself and build walls so you can make sure that when stuff really goes sideways and you are going to be working for the next 4 or 5 days straight on something, other folks are able to handle the day-to-day things. Take time to assess the value in engaging in a crisis. Right now, we live in a situation, in a time frame where businesses especially are being asked to comment on by media and third parties and brought into crises that have no value for our end stakeholders, right? They have no value for our customers or for our business. They're an easy headline. If media coverage is your go-to and you're looking to be positioned as an expert, it's there, it's easy. Are the long-term ramifications worth it? Is a big question to ask. Is this crisis your crisis? And I'll give you an example. Cisco does a lot of threat intelligence research. We do a lot of security research. We do a lot of studying what's crossing the internet in terms of traffic, what's malicious, what's benign, what's research, what's normal. Now, when attacks happen, we get a lot of inquiries. What do you know about this? What can you say? Who's at fault? That's always a big question, right? And that's an easy one to get headlines with and say, pat us on the back. Aren't we great? We blamed whatever nation state it is. Now, what are the ramifications of that? Great coverage, great expertise. We have a great team that is probably right, right? There's two of the things there. Attacks are never 100% attributable. The bad guys are brilliant, and they leave a lot of bad breadcrumbs on purpose to lead you to answers that are easy to jump to, right? It's the evidence you need, but it's not the right thing. The other thing to remember is that you're putting your customers out there when you engage in crises. Are our customers ready to be targeted because they're affiliated with us and we blamed a bad actor? Are their networks ready? Maybe. But it's not really, should I be the one to decide that for them? Right? If we go blame a nation state for something, and we have customers who have given testimonials and done case studies and spoke on our behalf at conferences to say we use Cisco, is it right to put them under the microscope, put a target on their back and say, hope you guys are ready? That's not exactly right. Our own systems, do we need to have the leadership discussions to say, hey, if we do this, we are making our systems a target? And most of our security leaders will say, that's fine, bring it, right? But we're going to have to add a bunch more people for that monitoring and remediating and addressing it. Cool. Do we agree to that spending? Does our CFO agree to that spending? Do our HR teams agree to that spending? Make sure you have those discussions up front. That's super, super important, because once it hits, it's too late. And you're going to spend it, and somebody else is going to lose because of it, right? Because it doesn't come out of thin air. So what's your job, aside from pulling together the team, right? You know all the stakeholders. You are the central hub of this spoken wheel scenario. Ask good questions, folks. Understand the big picture, the topics we just talked about. What are the real implications? Can you look around corners to the best of your ability? What don't you know? Note that, right? Your engineers might know. Your leaders might know. Your agencies might know. Oh my gosh, lean on agencies and crisis comms. They have a view of the world that you don't. They have other companies' experience that you don't. Identify potentials for confusion and misinformation and find a way to stop that ahead of time, right? What do we need to say to avoid concern? And understand your consumers, your primary stakeholders' pain points. What are they going to suffer? Maybe not because of you, but because of this. Your sales team's going to need to know that. Your folks who interact with your stakeholders are going to need to know that, and you're going to have to be ready to deal with it. And then the plan, right? We're going to need a plan. Everybody talks about crisis plans. Plans are useless. Planning's indispensable. That was a Dwight D. Eisenhower comment, and I love it, I love it, I love it. Build the plan, but know that the plan is not really going to help you when the time comes, right? Remember that. The act of planning is the important part. The sign is a great representation of that. Somebody had a plan, and they put it on paper, and they were going to tell you how to get this thing open and do what you got to do. And once you put it out there, it makes no sense at all once it's real. So don't just plan, test it. You want a fun job for either yourself or an intern or one of the folks who's growing in your organization in comms or marketing as you talk about crisis comms? Run a drill. Come up with the most ridiculous scenario your company could face and write it like a story, right? Like a you choose your path story or you choose your ending. I forget what they were called. They have the details. You have an organizer, but you spend 5 to 6 hours in a day and you bring in everybody who would realistically be part of that. Obviously, it's blocked on their calendar. They know there's a crisis drill. An example we used not too long ago is we had issued a new product and a gang in LA, relatively unknown, had the same name and they had launched some type of, major initiative or attack on rival gangs 2 weeks after the launch of our product. Okay, what can go wrong there, right? Bring in your marketing folks, bring in your social media folks, bring in your sales team, bring in, at the customer integration or escalation level, maybe your VPs or SVPs. Have people write the statement. Have people write the social media response. Have someone do a mock interview and then write the story about what was heard from that mock interview and share it back, right? Go through the exercise, and you may find that you have some of this. You have some of this push, pull, push that makes absolutely no sense when you tried to implement it. Fix it. Learn from it. Do multiple scenarios, so when something really does come up, you've thought about so many different things that you are able to adapt easily. It's super, super important. Keep the team agile. Test the theories and plans, identify the gaps, and for the storytellers who want to have some fun, have a blast with this exercise. Our interns do this every summer, and it is a great, great experience for them. And quite frankly, they are more in tune with their group, with their stakeholders, with their area of the world, with their personal experience that I might not think of, right? I don't live that life every day. I'm not currently on campus. I'm not currently in these scenarios. I live in a corporate world now, and I have for more than 15 years. I need some fresh perspective, and it is such an amazing experience for them. So test it. So what are we going to cover today quickly? The questions that I always get asked, right? These are the things that folks might find most fascinating about crisis communications. What do you do? When do you assign responsibility or blame an entity? Who's the most important audience? How much info do you share? Is there value in media coverage, or is it all about trying to make it go away? And how do you stay positive, right? We'll have plenty of time for Q&A after that, but these are kind of the core topics we'll jump into really quick. What do you do? There's a whole slew. But in crisis communications, you are not the statement writer. You are not just the media relations relayer of said statements. You really are building cross-functional teams. You are an equal partner in developing the strategy. Now, there are going to be decision makers beyond you, but you're going to offer recommendations. You create and review content, and every comms and marketing job, that's a big part of it. But you monitor incident teams, the teams who regularly have crises come up or who are assigned risk management. Most organizations have a risk management group. They have a supply chain or business continuity group. They have a data protection group, because that's kind of a required thing now, no matter where you are. Everybody has data. Work with those teams closely. Know what they're working on. Know what's around the corner. You handle the stakeholders. And I think our biggest job in this role is to make sure that your organization is doing what's right for your customers and your business. If your answer to a crisis only benefits one or the other, it's probably not the right path forward. Has to benefit your stakeholders, your customers, and your business. So what do? We kind of serve as this ray of light passing through here, but it goes both ways, right? We investigate the elements, we gather the experts, we establish goals, but a big part of what we do is filtering. So we bring that single message and make sure it's distributed to the right audiences, and the other way around. We bring in all of this information and give it a laser focus. Drive consistency and focused decision making. You should be a point of contact for everything that may go out about this, not just to the media, but to the sales teams or your customer-facing teams, your vendors, your supply chain folks, your partners, your social media teams, your marketing teams, your engineering teams, your HR organization, your employee comms group. There's a lot of stakeholders, and you should be a hub in there. And if you're not, and you don't have someone identified to be that hub, strongly recommend that you raise the flag and say, we need to figure that out. The one thing that always comes up, and I still run into this, and I'm sure many of you have as well, is that folks come and say, we need a statement. Something's gone wrong, we need a statement. And I even work with some of our customers on this, because they run into the same thing. When there's a major outage in a network, they say, help us, what do we say? And that's not the top priority. Your goal is, what are you trying to do? That'll decide whether or not you need a statement. And it'll also decide whether or not you blame someone. The other challenge is everyone wants to say, well, it wasn't our fault, but we're dealing with this issue and we're going to fix it. Well, if it's not your fault and you didn't have your arms around it to begin with, how are you going to fix it? Right? Seriously. So a lot of times we have a conversation about what are your goals in a crisis? A, reestablish confidence. I got this. Our company has this. We understand it. We're the experts in it. Therefore, we are the ones to fix it. Own the conversation about your business or your organization. Nobody should be leading a conversation about your organization in time of crisis. Such and such should not have reported that XYZ company did something or other. XYZ company notifies affected people that something happened. That should be your headline, right? Maintain the trust of your stakeholders. Drive attention and focus on the solution and the actions needed and minimizing unhelpful noise. As soon as you blame someone, a vendor, a component manufacturer, a different organization, somebody you bought your network gear from, somebody who manages your network gear because you don't have full-time IT staff, the list goes on. As soon as you blame someone, current media scenario, oh, they love a fight, right? This headline is going to be XYZ company blames ABC. Contentious scenario unfolds, potential sales going to be hit, it goes on and on and on. How does any of that coverage help the people who are affected by it? Does it tell them what to do? Does it tell them what to check? Does it give them confidence that you've got this in hand? Probably not. 9 times out of 10, it feels really easy to step back and say, not our fault. And it's not going to serve you well. It will feel good. It will make sure that your CEO or your COO or your VP of comms or marketing is not the one quoted. Is that really what you want? Do you want that vendor talking about your issue? Probably not. If you want to be the one to drive the message, focus on what people need to do, not who done it. Interesting versus important. This is something I use over and over and over again with a lot of folks. They're not the same thing, and they should not be treated equally, okay? What's interesting, I also call that gossip. What's important are facts that people need to know to make decisions and do something. In times of crisis, there are folks all over an organization that want information. They want to know the whodunit. They want to know who messed up. They want to know how we got here, how our systems didn't catch it, on and on and on. 9 times out of 10, they don't need any of that to actually do their job the rest of the day, or tomorrow, or in the weeks after that. It's interesting, but it's not important for them to know. It's also a journalist asking for a statement, or asking very specific questions about a crisis. They may need some gentle nudging about important things they should be asking, not the interesting stuff. You don't have to give them the interesting stuff. It's useless, it's noise, and it takes away from the ability to actually address the issue. This is most important when communicating with stakeholders affected by the crisis. I'll go back to data incidents like we talk about, right? You hear about data breaches with organizations. You hear about data exposures, which are not intentional, like, whoops, accidents happened, something got posted, something got shared. The people, the humans who are affected by that and need something from you need to know what to do. And anything that isn't helping with that is just noise. And finding out what to do might get lost in the clutter. So get rid of the clutter. Really, really important. This offers reassurance and clarity. The one thing we're also asked, again, I need a statement. Who's the most important stakeholder? Is it investors? Is it media? And there's this ongoing debate. My argument at the end of the day, the most important stakeholder is the person affected by a crisis, the humans involved. And if even your communications, your crisis communications effort is focused on them, everything else will fall into place. If I'm doing right by my customers and my business, my investors will know that this is in hand. I don't need to go tell my investors first. I should never lead with there's been a data incident in the press. They're not the first ones. Our customers should hear that from me and our business in some way, shape, or form, be it our sales team, be it an email, be it a dashboard banner, be it our website, and have established processes for communicating stuff to the important stakeholders. Everybody else comes second. I can't tell you how many times journalists have called and said, I heard X, Y, and Z is happening. What can you tell me? And my answer is, with all due respect, we owe it to our customers and partners to inform them about what they have to do first. I promise you will be my next phone call. And that shows transparency. I want to help you, but it also shows my top priority is getting this customer message out. They get to know first. I'm not even going to give it to you on background or under embargo. They get it first. And if your priorities are right, all of your other audiences will fall into place. Do the right thing for your customers and your business. I'll use this as a moment. There's a scenario that was about 13 years ago that Cisco faced. And it's really interesting because it still comes up today. We have a program called PSERT, which is the Product Security Incident Response Team. Essentially, they are the team responsible for informing customers when there's a product security vulnerability, which is essentially a flaw in code that requires a software update, long story short. They are the primary point of contact to customers to say, you need to go make an update, there's this issue. And we have a lot of processes and protocols in place to make sure that the fix is available before it's publicly known, and all kinds of work with researchers. All of that stems from an issue 13 years ago, where we had a researcher that came to our business, and he said, I found a vulnerability, found a bug, I found a typo, whatever it may be. And he said, I'm going to present it at a conference. So you have however many days or however many weeks to fix it before I present, right? It's called responsible disclosure. And our engineer, whoever he had been dealing with, or engineers, plural, not their fault, looked at what was right for the business. And they said, we won't have a fix in place. You're going to put our customers in danger. So we're going to try and use legal measures to make sure you can't present at that conference. That's not the right approach. They didn't know that. That wasn't the engineer's fault. They were trying to handle a crisis by themselves in what they thought was right for the business. You don't get to tell anybody about this. We're not ready. It's not about us. The right thing for our customers is to make sure that we are the ones communicating about it. And out of that, we built an entire program. Cisco built, I had nothing to do with it. Cisco built an entire program on how we inform our customers about things and how we make sure fixes are available and what our process is to make sure if they're not available, what are we going to do? What are we going to give them? How are they going to protect themselves? And this now employs a significant group of brilliant engineers and has set some very firm policy. There will never be another incident like that. And it's not about a mea culpa for that. It's about we learned from it. And we built our business on a program that now makes sure that we put our customers and our business first. We take care of both. We've received an inquiry, right? There's the famous words. Is there going to be coverage? Yes. Yep, there probably is. Be smart. Don't try to outsmart, right? Media, your stakeholders, the executives of your customer entities. I like to think I'm an intelligent person. I am not the smartest person in the room, and I don't need to be. If I'm being smart and I'm being truthful and I'm really understanding them, we're going to get through this just fine. The minute I try to be smarter or outsmart, we're going to trip. We're going to look foolish, and we're going to do something that isn't right for the business and the customer. Focus on what affected individuals need to know. We talked about that quite a bit. Your tone when there's a media inquiry or a third-party external inquiry is about sincere and helpful, not defensive, not secretive, right? It's not going to serve you well. If you want a chance to tell your story and to drive the story, you have to be engaged. Identify the spokesperson or the exec sponsor that's fitting for the issue, right? That PSERT example I gave you, I'm not putting my CEO out there for that. That's not his place. That's not his expertise, right? Sometimes it's the comms person. It's going to be a tough day, but it's you. Sometimes it's going to be your marketing leader. Sometimes it's going to be your CFO. If you're publicly traded, has anything to do with numbers, it's your CFO, and you're going to have to file a disclosure. Sometimes it's your CEO. Find the right leader. Not every crisis is CEO. You don't want your CEO tied with every crisis. You're not doing them any service, and you're not doing your business any service. You're also making mountains out of molehills. I used to horseback ride, and I had an instructor. That was her famous thing. Stop making mountains out of molehills, right? Really, how severe is this? Who needs to handle it? And remember that no answer, no comment, is often very much an answer. And sometimes that's okay. Other times, you want to have a say in this, right? Saying no comment makes you look guilty, makes you look flippant, careless. It can make you look a little classless. It can make your organization seem callous. Think that through. No comment is very much a comment. And if the allegations are about you, you're looking at Pandora's box in terms of a world of challenges. There is such thing as a good story during a crisis, right? It's not about hiding media coverage, factual in tone, right? If I have a security vulnerability, I want folks to know about it, but I want them to know the facts about it. I want them to give me credit, Cisco credit, our organization credit for being the one that told everyone about it. I wanted to get rid of any unhelpful noise, right? They wouldn't comment about X. That part of the story goes away, right? Any story that directs your audience to the helpful information they need to address this crisis, right? That's good information. Amplify that, share that, post that. I don't even care if it's on social media. Anything that shows you have the tools that people need and it's easy for them to access it, and you gave full transparency and visibility of that to the people who could get your message out, that's good stuff, guys. That's exactly what we're looking for. And they're not going to give you credit for doing the right thing. Nobody's going to pat you on the back during a crisis and say, good job, so glad you did this, so glad you set up free credit monitoring after you exposed everybody's social security number. You're not going to get credit for doing the right thing. But the facts themselves will show that you did it, right? At the end of the day, when Harvard Business Review does a review of your scenario, you did the right thing. And the comms and marketing folks will talk about it, and then they'll debate about it, and then they'll talk about how you could have done it better. Often the greatest value you're going to generate in a crisis communications situation is the incident that was properly and quietly resolved. Not hidden, right? Absolutely not hidden. But you pulled the right people into the room to have the tough conversations and fix it before it became a major issue. You had enough visibility into what's going on across the organization that this was handled in a way that made it a non-issue. Now, that doesn't mean they all go away quietly. Sometimes it's about knowing that it's going to be really public and really visible, and you met all those criteria we talked about on the last slide. That's huge value, right? There was no way Kmart was going to make Michael Moore go away and not have that story published. That just doesn't happen. So what's the best possible outcome? Map that out, figure out those goals, and drive toward it. Don't start with the statement. So how do you keep perspective in all of this, right? How do you stay sane? How do you stay positive? How do you still enjoy your work? There are a couple key factors. One of them, I'm only here to help. I did not expose 1.3 million social security numbers, right? I did not put maliciously bad code into software. I did not do things maliciously, purposely. I'm not even involved. I'm here to help. I am one of the responders. That's helpful. That's powerful, right? I'm here to help. Being defined by much more than your job is also important. I'm a mom. I'm a hiker. I'm a wife. I'm a practicer of yoga when I get around to it, right? I am a lot of things. This is one aspect of who I am. But everything in my life is not crisis, and it can't be. You'll become jaded. I have a great respect for our organization's leaders. This comes back to the company you keep. If you're going to take on a crisis comms role, please, please, please make sure that you've done the homework to say, I'm on board with this. It's okay to disagree about the tactics. It's okay to disagree. You're not going to get your way every time. You're going to give 3 recommendations. Do nothing, fix it at 110%, or fix it at 100%. Right? There's no in between. There's no halfway. There's no middle ground. You're not the decision maker. You've got SVPs and CEOs and CFOs and COOs and a lot of other titles, and lawyers, right? They're going to make decisions you may not agree with. But make sure that you do fundamentally agree with your organization on a cultural level and how it's going to treat humans in times of crisis. And if you've bought in on that, you can deal with whatever may come your way. I get to work every day on interesting stuff that matters, like for real, matters to the business, with some of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. That is incredibly motivating, right? I'm learning from people every single day on stuff I never knew I wanted to know. That's important. That's huge. And that makes this job worth doing. And the one thing is that perspective. Incidents are a small fraction of the business that our organization does. Make sure that that's the truth for you. Because if crisis comms isn't just a few people's full-time job, if that's how the organization operates, and the other stuff is when you get lucky, you need to think about is that crisis comms that you want to be doing? Is that the organization you want to do it for? So I want to take a minute and do just a sample scenario, right? So we've talked about a lot here, and I'm not going to come to the statement. What I'd love to hear, interesting versus important, what are the questions that you need to ask in this scenario? What do you need to know before you start crafting messaging? And the incident is this. One of your employees posted confidential customer information on a public forum or website. Everybody has space, right? The world is your oyster. You can talk to whomever you want, whenever you want, and it's really, really easy. You don't need a coding background to create a web page anymore, right? So one of your employees posted confidential information on a public-facing site. What are the questions you think you need to ask? What's important to know?
Where is it and what is it?
Where is it and what is it? Very good. Yes?
How many people are affected?
How many people are affected?
How did the employee have access?
How did the employee have access? Wonderful, wonderful question. Yeah.
Potential economic ramifications.
Yes, absolutely. Economic ramifications. Go ahead.
What people are commenting on
I'm sorry?
what people are commenting on
Yes. What the ongoing conversation is, what are people saying on that webpage?
Are there pictures?
Are there pictures? Pictures are worth 1,000,000 words. 1,000 doesn't do it justice. Isn't that the truth? Yeah.
Does the client know?
Does the client know? Yes. Very good.
What motivated the employee to do so, and where is he or she located?
Interesting. What motivated the employee? These are all great. Here's what I'll tell you I ask. Here's what I share. Here's what I use to build my statement, and I'll go through these quickly. Is it still visible? Is it still there? Do we need to take it down? Do we need to call someone at 4 a.m., right? What do we need to do? Was there personally identifiable information involved? Confidential and sensitive information is not the same as personally identifiable. That is an important distinction in today's world. Some of you may have heard about something called GDPR that has to do with privacy rules and compliance in Europe. However, the internet's global. So whether or not you're in Europe doesn't matter. If someone in Europe can access your website, you're subject to it, or your business. Is there identity theft at risk? Are there business security implications, right? Was it somebody's passwords? Was it somebody's access badge algorithm? Are there security implications? What are the risks of harm that can come from it? Are there actions that we as the organization need to take to protect individuals? Are we offering a service to do it? Or are we just telling them good luck with that, right? Are there services we're offering to assess the security implications? We're a tech company, so we have that ability. However, if you're not a tech company and you've done this, and there are security implications for another business, what's your plan to offer security service? Do you have someone on a PO already? Because gosh knows that takes forever, right? We have to think these things through. Was the employee supposed to have access? Were they allowed to have that? If they were, that's a great thing that we can convey to the affected users. This is a trusted employee who had access. He was supposed to have, or she was supposed to have access. And what steps are we taking to prevent this from happening again? These are the core questions that people who are affected by something will need to know to make a decision about whether or not they need to take action. These are the core things that we work to get to the bottom of immediately. And we call anybody and everybody we need to. And if you can't answer one of these questions and you don't have a plan to respond to it if you do get the answer, start thinking about that now. And what are you going to do to put those tools and processes in place? So I'm going to stop there. I want to give everyone a chance to ask questions because I know crisis comms folks always have questions. So I don't want to fill the whole time with me just standing up here lecturing. Yes, please.
I have two questions. One is,
Okay, so I'm going to take your second question first, and that was how do you bring in employee communications? Because making sure that they are your front, right? They are the front-facing part of your organization. I would say informing them is important, but they're not your first audience. They're not the first one to think about in terms of the message. Now, I have the good fortune, we have a nice-sized communications team at Cisco. I create what is called an integrated communications team up front. And I have a leader from every subset of comms in our organization that know they're on point, right? So I have several directors that know I'm going to be reaching out to you if X, Y, or Z comes up and you're going to have to pick up the phone. Now, what does that team look like? That's employee communications. That's someone from PR, IR, AR, social media, marketing, field communications or sales communications, which is a separate beast. And we make sure that they're ready to go and they know their role. But my first priority audience is always who's affected. Not what we're going to tell everyone else to say to them if they get questions. What are we telling them? A lot of that's interesting, right? What's important for the sales team to know? Do I want my sales team talking about an incident in depth? Probably not. I want them to have just enough to not look foolish in the conversation and know how to drive to the information, the single source of truth somewhere, right? Now, your second question is a little more complex, so I wanted to chat about that, and that is what if your counsel isn't being taken? And that's where it comes to a kind of a pivotal point. It comes back to your company culture, who you are, who your company is, and are you really willing and wanting to represent them in times of crisis? I will say you're not the decision maker. That is apparent. There is actually a lecturer who has an entire series on advising executives. And his takeaway really was those three things. You can do nothing, you can fix it completely, or you can fix it at 120%. Do it, or do it amazingly, or do nothing at all. Now, you're going to advise on those three things. And I think I have great visibility in an organization, and maybe you do too. But the thing you also have to remember is there are probably only 3 people in your company that have complete visibility into everything that's going on. And decisions may be made on information that is important, but that you're not going to have access to. There's usually a driving reason if it's not a culture issue, right? If it's not a priorities are set in the wrong place, it's going to come down to you don't have visibility into exactly why this is happening. And you may not be read in. Maybe they can't. Maybe it's an SEC issue, right? If you're publicly traded, there's some information that if you're not one of like the top 3 or 4 people, you're not going to know. And that's where trusting your leaders becomes really important. And as long as you have done a great job of filling out the options and the implications of not implementing your recommended one, you have done your job with full transparency to say, here's the risk, here's my advice, and they go a different direction. You've got a couple choices: get on board or decide whether or not this is the place for you. You can't stay in hate. You can't say, see, this is going to blow up. I told you so. And wait for it to happen and then share that with them and say, see, I told you so. Right? There's another good way to get yourself out of a job. That's not going to work. What can happen is you've outlined those risks. They go a different direction. One of those risks becomes reality. You know what your job is then? Deal with that risk. Deal with that new crisis. Learn from it. Don't repeat it. Help your leaders grow. You are an advisor and a counselor. And while you may have an equal seat at the table, we're not the decision maker. And there are reasons for that. And as long as the reasons are justified and you can buy in on it and say, he knows something I don't, she knows something I don't, and I can't. And I'm okay with that. If you're not in that role, do some serious soul searching. Yes?
So I love your advice about when the meeting.
Great question. It is about the immediate inquiry comes in. You've shared the fact on background, right? Not quotable, that you're going to focus on the affected customers or individuals first and that you will get back to them. The journalist is on a deadline and they're going to run the story anyways. Relationship with media can help you with that. in crisis comes, I don't work with the journalists every day on all the happy, fun stuff, right? And on a lot of the amplifying stuff. I do sometimes lean on our PR team that does that day in and day out to see if we can buy a little bit of time. I also acknowledge that, make sure I share that with leaders to say, hey, the Wall Street Journal has called. They're running a story at 4. We're not notifying customers till 5, and they are our top priority. That original story is going to run at 4, saying we weren't able to comment. But I've also worked with the journalist to ask him or her to commit to updating that story once we've notified customers. And sometimes that's the best you can do. You don't have to leave it at no comment. It's a lot of follow-up work, right? Sometimes that relationship will buy you time. Sometimes they will ask, can I at least acknowledge that I've talked to a representative of the organization, and they will be notifying customers with details that they need to know in the near future through established channels? A lot of times I'll say, sure, right? We have an established escalation path. We have established tools and locations that our customers go to find the information they need. And that's where they should hear about it first. And if the media story says stuff will be posted in all those places we promise you it'll be posted, I'm okay with that. Yes?
Excuse me, during the presentation you said,
Okay, so that was about balance and doing the right thing for all the involved stakeholders. And if they're not aligning, or if the decision makers for those audiences are not aligning.
all of the above.
Okay. My core go-to there is if there's that much misalignment, you haven't gone high enough up in the organization, right? If you're running into a serious disconnect, if there's a real dissonance between what you say your company represents and what the leaders who are currently involved are thinking about doing, you haven't gone high enough yet. And that's where sometimes it has to be thoughtful, right? Because it's not usually a great, it can be a career-limiting decision to throw an SVP under the bus, right? It can. But your name's on this now, right? Your name's going down on this. And in today's world, that doesn't get forgotten. It doesn't go away. The internet has archived everything into perpetuity, right? Anything you're involved in, your name is on if it's public and it's being handled wrong. You have to, for your own sake and your business's sake, make sure that you are carefully, respectfully elevating it to the right levels in the organization. And that's where that culture comes in again. Where do they stand on some of these really hot topics that you're going to be dealing with? What are the core values and driving decision-making on those? And if those aren't outlined, start asking that question now, right? Come up with these scenarios. These are a great way to try and get people aligned, just to do drills. Make it so they're going to be at odds. Make them talk about it and think about it and figure out where you're going to land when the real stuff comes up. Hi.
I'm a sports writer, and sports is a lot of crisis.
It is. It absolutely is. So the comment there was focused on timeliness and the speed at which information now moves and how fast stories are published, how fast social media commentary happens, and how should organizations deal with that to make sure that we are not contradicting ourselves within 2 hours, right? And I think that's where there's that relationship management with journalists to say, here are our established processes, right? If you don't have them, you're going to be in a tough spot. Transparency with what you do know, all right? If there are affected stakeholders and there's information you can share that's going to mitigate misinformation, it may not be the whole answer, but it's going to mitigate misinformation. If I'm working with you and you're publishing a story and I can't give you a statement, right? But I talk to you and you can be open with me about your angle. I can let you know if you're going down the wrong path. I can point you in the right direction. I can give stakeholders enough information and resources, right? Maybe what I share with you is that something, X, Y, and Z will be available, and I'll give you a URL, right? I will give you a single source of truth that may be forthcoming. And that's an important thing there too, is a single source of truth. What is it? What is it for different types of issues? Because it's not always a web page. It's not always, a mea culpa, I'm sorry, ad purchase in a major newspaper. It's going to be different. And you have to figure out what that single source of truth is likely to be given a handful of scenarios up front. So when you do have these really timely scenarios, you can let folks know what to expect and when. And a good journalist, knowing that their answer is coming, will leave a placeholder in that story. And they're not going to not going to throw your organization completely under the bus, right? Now, social media, people might. What's your policy on social media? Are you going to get into a back and forth rant on Reddit? You going to take the high road, leave a simple statement, and move on with the world? Sometimes crisis communications, to the point that our speaker made earlier, was it's not about just this instant, it's the bigger picture. So say there is a rant on Reddit, and it gets picked up on Twitter, and people start making images to go with it, and you're now the subject of memes, right? Are you going to fight every single one of those in real time? That's like playing whack-a-mole. It is. And it's not going to serve you. It's going to take up a lot of time and energy and internal infighting and disagreement. And, okay, step back, big picture. What are we trying to do here? We need to make sure that a product or one of our executives or our business is protected. Okay, playing whack-a-mole probably isn't going to do that. We need to get our marketing team in here immediately. We need to get our sales team in here immediately, and we need to talk about what we can do as a unified front, as one organization, to step forward and beyond this. And maybe it's a lot of investment in amplifying things that counter that argument, but we're not going to connect the dots. People are smart. Oh my gosh, your audiences are so smart. We don't give folks enough credit, especially when we're writing messaging, right? And I love my engineers, but they want to make sure that whoever reads whatever we're putting together is as smart as them by the time it's done. They're already as smart as you. We don't have to spell stuff out. People are not dumb. So take a step back. Look at the bigger picture. What is the entire program that you're going to put together over the long run? We're going to give you an update for your story, right? We're going to give you what you need now, which may be a no comment, but I've got a statement coming. We're going to give you a statement in an hour. We're going to point you to the single source of truth. And then over time, we're going to take a step forward as a company, looking at a lot of other ways to counter this that may not be direct, but in people's minds, they will connect the dots. Have faith in your audience to connect the dots in the long run. All right. Thank you folks so much for having me today. This has been a pleasure.